A popular high schooler mocks his new immigrant classmate for her accent. But when a major competition is announced, he doesn't realize she's about to become his biggest challenge. Amina stood in front of Lakeside High, taking in the sprawling red brick building, banners draped proudly along its sides with the school's name. Her eyes, bright and determined, flickered with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was her first day at an American high school, and she wanted to make it a good one. Back home in Senegal, she had always been one of the top students, and even now, with all the unfamiliar faces and voices around her, Amina held her head high. She knew she belonged. Inside the building, however, some students weren't so quick to welcome her. "Look at her," Bradley sneered from across the hallway as he noticed her walk through the doors, her dark braids neatly tied back, eyes scanning the corridor for her first classroom. "Another one of those exchange students, right?" His friends chuckled, nudging each other, eager to watch the show. Bradley was used to being the center of attention. Tall, with neatly groomed blonde hair and a confident smirk, he was the son of a city councilman, accustomed to his father's status granting him a certain untouchable reputation. His friends followed his lead, never questioning his taunts, enjoying the power of their little clique. Amina found her classroom, took a deep breath and entered. She noticed a few heads turning her way, whispering, some with looks of curiosity, others with faint sneers. She wasn't new to this. Her parents had moved several times as her father's work in international finance brought them from one country to another, and each school she attended came with its share of challenges. But her resilience was stronger than their curiosity, and she was used to proving herself through hard work and kindness. Yet Bradley didn't leave her alone. As soon as he realized she was in his math class, his comments escalated. "Hey, Amina, that's your name, right?" he called out during a break. "Do you even understand what the teacher's saying, or is that accent getting in the way?" He snickered, tossing a glance at his friends to ensure they were watching. Amina's face flushed, but she steadied herself. "I understand perfectly well," she replied, her voice calm and steady, despite the uncomfortable knot forming in her stomach. "Sure, sure," Bradley shot back, rolling his eyes as his friends chuckled behind him. "Just remember, this is America. You're going to have to work hard to catch up to us, you know?" But Amina didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to her notebook, scribbling her notes as she always did. Bradley's words bounced off her, and while they stung, she reminded herself that this was his problem, not hers. Her focus was on her goals. The days turned into weeks, and Bradley's taunting only intensified. He made a habit of imitating her accent in the hallways, calling her the foreigner in front of others and treating her like she was somehow beneath him. But Amina's reputation slowly grew among the teachers and staff. Her grades were impeccable, her dedication undeniable, and she often stayed late at school, working in the library or seeking extra guidance from her teachers. One afternoon, just as Amina was settling into a study session, the school principal, Mrs. Hayes, walked into the room. A middle-aged woman with a warm but firm demeanor, Mrs. Hayes took notice of Amina's focused demeanor and gentle persistence. She had heard rumors about Bradley's comments but hadn't witnessed them firsthand. Yet she knew enough about Amina to see the potential the girl held. "Amina, how are you adjusting to Lakeside?" Mrs. Hayes asked, her eyes kind but inquisitive. "I'm doing well, thank you," Amina replied politely. "The work is challenging, but I'm enjoying it." Mrs. Hayes nodded approvingly. "Good to hear, and I hope you know that if you ever need support or someone to talk to, you can come to my office." Amina thanked her, grateful for the gesture, but eager to show she could handle herself. Mrs. Hayes watched her for a moment, noticing the quiet determination in her eyes. She had a feeling Amina's time at Lakeside was about to leave a mark. A week later, Mrs. Hayes made an important announcement over the loudspeakers during homeroom. "Attention Lakeside students, I am thrilled to announce that this year we'll be hosting the annual City Scholars Competition. This academic contest is open to students across the district, and the winner will receive a fully funded scholarship to any college of their choice, alongside additional awards and mentorship opportunities. If you're interested, applications are open, and I encourage our brightest minds to seize this opportunity." The room buzzed with excitement. Bradley's eyes lit up at the announcement, his confidence unshaken. "Easy," he murmured to his friends. "That scholarship is as good as mine." His friends exchanged knowing glances, giving him enthusiastic pats on the back. Bradley had always excelled in academics, and his family connections seemed to assure him of his inevitable success. A few students mumbled his name, practically assuming he'd be a shoo-in. But Amina also heard the announcement, and a spark ignited within her. She knew the scholarship could change everything for her family. Determined, she walked straight to Mrs. Hayes' office after school and submitted her application. The competition was rigorous. designed to test not only academic knowledge, but creativity, leadership, and presentation skills. Each student had to present research on a significant issue facing society and propose innovative solutions. As the students were given their instructions and deadlines, Bradley smirked confidently, still convinced of his success. When he spotted Amina signing up, his confidence only grew. Really? He sneered. You think you stand a chance at this? Don't you know how tough this is? It's not just some spelling bee. Amina met his gaze. I know exactly what it is, she said quietly, her voice steady, and I'm not afraid of a challenge. Bradley raised an eyebrow, chuckling under his breath. Well, good luck, I guess. Maybe they'll give you an award for trying. He and his friends laughed as he sauntered away, leaving Amina standing alone, unfazed. As the competition began, Amina worked tirelessly, researching and crafting her presentation. Her topic focused on economic challenges in underserved communities, a subject she knew well from personal experience and one she cared deeply about. Her passion shone through her work, and as she delved into her research, she discovered countless ways to strengthen her presentation, carefully preparing to impress the judges. Bradley, meanwhile, took a different approach. He assumed his natural charisma would carry him through and relied on flashy slides rather than deep analysis. He chose a topic that he thought would be an easy win, environmental awareness, but he barely scratched the surface, assuming his status and connections would give him an edge. Their first presentations were scheduled for the following week. On the day of Amina's presentation, the room was packed with students, teachers, and several judges. Bradley's friends had gathered near the front, clearly there to mock her attempts, exchanging amused glances. But as soon as Amina began to speak, the room fell silent. She spoke with clarity and conviction, each word thoughtful and precise, her accent soft, but her voice filled with authority. The passion behind her ideas was evident, and her personal story made her message all the more powerful. Mrs. Hayes watched from the back, her eyes filled with pride. She could see the impact Amina was making on the crowd. Even Bradley, though he tried to look unimpressed, couldn't fully hide the look of surprise on his face. Afterward, Amina received a round of applause, and as she stepped off the stage, Mrs. Hayes met her with a warm smile. You did wonderfully, Amina, she said, giving her a reassuring nod. But Bradley, undeterred, smirked as he approached her in the hallway. Don't get your hopes up, he sneered. They're just being polite. I'll show you how it's really done. Amina didn't respond, but deep down she knew she'd done her best, and she wasn't about to let his words shake her. The school's auditorium was packed once again. Each week of the competition, the crowd seemed to grow, as word spread about the City Scholars competition and the impressive talents being showcased. And, though Bradley assumed all eyes would be on him, it was Amina who became the surprise favorite, her reputation as a brilliant and poised competitor spreading quickly through the school. With every new round, Amina's presentations became more compelling. She approached each topic with depth, connecting her research to real-world challenges she had experienced or witnessed in her own life. The judges were impressed by her unique perspectives and the personal anecdotes she wove into her presentations. Her resilience and wisdom shone through every word, making her a powerful force in the competition. But as Amina's success grew, so did Bradley's frustration. He'd expected her to crumble under the pressure, or at least to reveal some weakness that would disqualify her as a serious competitor. But she was relentless, and her presentations were undeniably impressive. His irritation boiled over after every round, and his comments became more scathing. One day, after a particularly strong presentation from Amina, Bradley cornered her in the hallway, his face flushed with annoyance. So what's the big deal? You think you're better than me just because you know how to play the sympathy card? He sneered. His friends hung back, snickering, encouraged by his outburst. You probably think if you throw in enough sad little stories, the judges will feel sorry for you. Amina met his gaze, her expression calm and composed. I'm here to do my best, she replied simply, and I think everyone in the competition deserves respect. Bradley scoffed, rolling his eyes. Yeah, right. Just remember, you're only here because they need to meet some diversity quota. That's the only reason you're getting any attention. He shot her a cold glare before striding away, his friends trailing behind him with mocking laughs. Despite Bradley's relentless insults, Amina continued to focus on her work. She knew her value and refused to let his words distract her. She poured her energy into preparing for each round, spending long hours in the library, fine-tuning her presentations, and perfecting her responses to the judges' questions. Her dedication was beginning to show, as her scores consistently ranked at the top, keeping her neck and neck with Bradley. As the final round of the competition approached, the pressure was palpable. The school was buzzing with excitement, and rumors swirled about who would take the top prize. Teachers, students, and even parents gathered in the auditorium, eager to watch the showdown between Amina and Bradley. It was a classic David and Goliath tale. The quiet, hard-working newcomer against the arrogant golden boy of the school. For the final presentation, each competitor was asked to deliver a comprehensive plan to address a social issue of their choice. Bradley decided to focus on environmental sustainability, convinced his flashy graphics and polished presentation would dazzle the judges. He spared no expense, even hiring a private coach to help him refine his delivery, sure that his superior resources would guarantee him the win. Meanwhile, Amina chose a subject close to her heart: improving educational opportunities in underserved communities. Her plan was ambitious, yet grounded, drawing on research and personal insights from her own experiences. She spent hours creating thoughtful, detailed visuals, practicing her speech, and rehearsing her arguments until she was sure every word would resonate with the audience. On the day of the final presentations, the tension in the auditorium was electric. Bradley's name was called first, and he strode onto the stage with his usual swagger. His presentation was smooth, polished, and packed with impressive statistics and graphics. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had always assumed he'd be the star of the show. The audience applauded politely, and Bradley gave a self-satisfied grin as he left the stage, convinced he'd sealed his victory. Then it was Amina's turn. She took a deep breath as she stepped onto the stage, clutching her notes. The room was silent, the audience hanging on her every word as she began to speak. She described the barriers many students face in accessing quality education and outlined her vision for creating pathways to success for underserved communities. Her voice was steady, her passion evident, and as she shared stories from her own life, the crowd was visibly moved. As she concluded her presentation, Amina looked out at the sea of faces before her, her gaze finally resting on the judges. "This plan isn't just a proposal," she said softly but firmly. "It's a commitment to create a better future for everyone, no matter where they come from." The applause was thunderous, echoing through the auditorium as she stepped off the stage. Mrs. Hayes was waiting for her at the edge, beaming with pride. "You were incredible, Amina," she whispered. "No matter what happens, know that you've made a real impact." Amina smiled, a quiet sense of accomplishment settling over her. She had done everything she could. Now it was up to the judges. After the final presentations, Bradley's frustration boiled over into outright hostility. He couldn't believe the attention Amina was receiving and was infuriated by the positive reactions to her work. "You think you're so great, don't you?" He spat, cornering her in the hallway as she packed up her books. His face was twisted with anger, a stark contrast to his usual calm composure. "Well, I've got news for you. People like you don't win things like this. You're just a charity case, and everyone knows it." Amina looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "I don't need your approval to know my worth, Bradley," she replied. "I'm here to make a difference, not to play your games." Bradley laughed bitterly. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts when you lose." The results would be announced the next morning at a special assembly, and the tension was at an all-time high. Bradley paced the halls that evening, nervously awaiting his victory, convinced that he would emerge triumphant. After all, he was Bradley, the school's star, the golden boy, the one with all the connections. And to him, Amina was nothing more than an obstacle that he would soon leave behind. But little did he know, his confidence was about to be shattered in a way he'd never expected. The next day, the entire school gathered in the auditorium, abuzz with anticipation. Mrs. Hayes stood on stage holding a small envelope containing the final results. Bradley watched her with a smug grin, his arms crossed as he waited for his name to be called. Mrs. Hayes cleared her throat, her voice resonating across the room. "Before I announce the winner of the City Scholars Competition," she began, "I want to say how proud I am of each participant. The dedication and creativity we've seen have been truly inspiring." She glanced at the crowd, her eyes resting on Amina, offering her a small, knowing smile. "But of course, there can only be one winner. And this year the scholarship goes to Amina Diallo." The auditorium erupted in applause. Amina's classmates cheered, her teachers beamed with pride, and even a few parents in the audience stood to applaud. Amina sat in stunned silence for a moment, the realization washing over her. She had won. As she made her way to the stage to accept her award, Mrs. Hayes continued, addressing the crowd with a sense of pride and purpose. "It is my great pleasure to recognize Amina for her outstanding work and dedication. Her vision for creating educational opportunities for all is not only admirable but essential. Amina, we are also proud of you. Bradley's face was a mask of shock. His jaw clenched as he watched Amina receive her award. He felt a surge of anger and disbelief, unable to comprehend how he could have lost. But what Mrs. Hayes said next made his humiliation complete. And, as a special recognition, she continued, her eyes glinting with pride, I'd like to announce that this year's scholarship sponsor is none other than the Diallo Foundation, a renowned organization dedicated to advancing educational equity, founded by Amina's family. The crowd gasped, and Bradley's face went pale. He had mocked Amina relentlessly, belittling her heritage, her accent, her dreams, only to discover that her family was behind the very scholarship he had been so desperate to win. The irony was too much to bear. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. As Amina accepted her award, she glanced briefly at Bradley, her expression calm and unbothered. She had risen above his insults, proving herself through hard work and determination. The applause thundered through the room as Mrs. Hayes placed the scholarship certificate in Amina's hands. Bradley slumped in his seat, utterly humiliated as the weight of his actions crashed down on him. He had belittled and mocked someone who not only outshone him in talent and dedication, but whose family had the influence he'd only dreamed of. As the crowd began to disperse, Bradley sat in stunned silence, watching Amina walk off the stage, her head held high, her victory a testament to her resilience and strength. As the assembly ended, Amina stepped down from the stage, her heart swelling with pride as she held the scholarship certificate in her hands. The applause and cheers had left her feeling more accomplished than ever, and for the first time she felt fully at home in the bustling halls of Lakeside High. Bradley, meanwhile, remained frozen in his seat, a sinking feeling in his chest as he watched Amina being congratulated by teachers and classmates alike. Mrs. Hayes's words still rang in his ears. The Diallo Foundation, a renowned organization dedicated to advancing educational equity, founded by Amina's family. He hadn't just lost a scholarship. He had mocked someone whose family was a powerhouse in the very field he'd hoped to succeed in. The irony was cruel, and he knew there was no way to salvage his reputation now. As students streamed out of the auditorium, many of them stopped to congratulate Amina, shaking her hand or offering her encouraging words. Even some of Bradley's own friends hung back, uncomfortable with how everything had unfolded, reluctant to associate themselves with his bitterness any longer. In the days following the assembly, the social dynamic at school shifted drastically. Bradley could feel the isolation creeping in as whispers followed him down the hallways. His friends, once so eager to back him up, began to keep their distance, and even teachers seemed to give him curt nods instead of their usual warmth. The news had spread quickly. Bradley, the school's star student, had lost the scholarship to the new girl he had relentlessly mocked. And worse, he had insulted the very foundation that had sponsored it. One day, as he walked down the hallway, he overheard a group of students talking near the lockers. Did you hear? Apparently Bradley thought he was a shoo-in for the scholarship, and then it turns out Amina's family runs the whole thing. Can you believe that? Another student chimed in. It's karma if you ask me. You'd think he'd have shown some respect for her by now. Their laughter stung, and for the first time Bradley felt a pang of shame, realizing just how badly he had handled everything. But the humiliation wasn't over yet. Mrs. Hayes had called him into her office, requesting to discuss his behavior. As he entered, he braced himself, but nothing could have prepared him for the quiet disappointment in her eyes as she looked up from her desk. Bradley, I've been hearing reports about your conduct toward Amina, she began, her tone firm, but laced with the weight of unspoken disapproval. As someone who's held a leadership role in this school, I expected better. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hayes, I didn't mean... She raised a hand, silencing him. I know what you meant, but intentions don't excuse behavior, Bradley. I've watched Amina work harder than most students, and she's done so with grace, despite the unkindness she's faced. I want you to think about what it means to truly lead, because this behavior is not it. Her words hit harder than any scolding he'd ever received. Mrs. Hayes had always spoken highly of him, and to see her disappointed was a new and painful experience. He felt a knot in his stomach as he left her office, realizing that he had not only lost his scholarship, but the respect of the very people he'd once tried to impress. Amina, meanwhile, found herself surrounded by unexpected allies. Students who had once only watched her from afar began to approach her, asking questions about her interests, her background, and even how she had managed to stay so composed despite Bradley's constant insults. One afternoon, as Amina was organizing her notes in the library, a familiar face approached her. It was Emma, one of Bradley's closest friends, looking hesitant as she stood by the table. "Hey, Amina," Emma began, her tone softer than usual. I I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have spoken up when Bradley was being so rude to you. It wasn't right, and I wish I'd had the courage to say something." Amina looked up, surprised but grateful. She offered a small smile. "Thank you, Emma. It means a lot to hear that. I just focused on doing my best. Everything else is up to people to decide for themselves." Emma nodded, clearly moved by Amina's response. "You really deserve that scholarship. I just wanted you to know that." She paused, then added, "And if you ever need help with anything, I'd be happy to work with you." It was a small gesture, but to Amina, it felt like a sign that her presence was finally being accepted, not just tolerated, but respected. More and more, students began to treat her with kindness, and teachers often praised her openly, making her feel that her hard work had truly paid off. Bradley's final downfall came during a class project a few weeks later. In an effort to mend fences, he had requested to be Amina's partner on a group assignment, hoping to salvage some of his reputation by showing he could work with anyone. Amina, who harbored no ill will, accepted politely, seeing it as an opportunity to move forward. But as they worked together, it quickly became apparent that Bradley was unprepared. He had coasted for so long, relying on charm and connections, that he struggled with the depth of research and planning required for the project. Amina, who was meticulous and detail-oriented, took the lead, guiding their efforts and ensuring that the work met the teacher's high standards. In the end, they presented the project, and while Amina excelled, Bradley faltered, stumbling over his words as he tried to explain his portion of the work. The class watched in silence, the contrast between their preparation and effort painfully clear. By the end, even he could see that Amina's knowledge and dedication had once again highlighted his own lack of effort. When they returned to their seats, Bradley leaned over, his voice low. I, I'm sorry, Amina," he muttered, his tone laced with genuine regret. "I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. You've proven me wrong in more ways than one." Amina looked at him, a mix of sympathy and quiet pride in her eyes. "I appreciate that, Bradley," she replied. "I hope from now on you remember that everyone deserves respect." Bradley nodded, his expression somber. For the first time, he understood the importance of humility, of acknowledging others' worth without letting pride get in the way. In the weeks that followed, Amina's success continued to inspire others. Her scholarship win and her perseverance became a story told around Lakeside, a reminder of resilience and respect. Students often sought her advice, and she became a mentor to others who had once felt out of place, sharing her journey and encouraging them to stay true to their own dreams. For Bradley, life at Lakeside changed too. He was no longer the untouchable star, and though he struggled with the adjustment, he began to rebuild his reputation slowly, this time with a focus on integrity and humility. Though the journey was difficult, he never forgot Amina's calm response to his apology, a reminder that real strength came not from belittling others, but from lifting them up. And as for Amina, she flourished. Her scholarship allowed her to pursue her dreams, and her time at Lakeside left a legacy that would be remembered by students and staff alike. The once mocked new girl had not only earned her place, but had shown everyone that respect, hard work, and resilience were the true markers of success. With every step she took toward her future, Amina knew one thing for certain. She had won more than just a scholarship. She had proven the power of kindness and courage, and most importantly, the enduring value of staying true to herself.